Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am back again for my regularly scheduled midweek cozy reading. Tonight we'll be reading chapters 16 and 17 of To All Things an End. There are a few more chapters left in this story. We are slowly approaching the end, so just bear with us. And I appreciate each and every one of you that has joined me this evening. And let's get started. All right. I'm just rearranging some windows over here so that I can see everything. Hi Sigma, welcome in! Thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate you. Well, hopefully you enjoy. I know it's late for you, so don't stay up too late on my account. Try and get some rest. But hopefully you'll get to hear some of my story this evening before you head to bed. So I appreciate that you're here. So thank you. So we're going to start our evening off with chapter 16 of To All Things an End. Yes, that is the entire point of me streaming my fanfictions, actually. It's supposed to be a relaxing little corner midweek to help everybody chill out. And if you have any trouble hearing me with my mic volume or anything like that, please let me know. I'm still tweaking my audio levels a bit, so hopefully you can hear that. Give me just a second here. I'm going to see if I can tweak my music up a little bit. Okay. Alrighty. Good. I was told the last couple of streams that I was a little quiet, so I'm actually gonna... I turned my volume up, but I'm gonna pull my mic back just a little. It's right over here, just off camera. So, so it's literally like right here. All right. So, chapter 16. Colonel, came a voice that drew Maxwell's attention as he entered Thora Saunders Bridge. I've got Blue Talon on final approach. Lady Card is requesting clearance to land. Lady Card? Maxwell asked himself as he nodded to the officer to give clearance. That's right. Stefan's not flying this time. Ari slowly walked into the hangar as Blue Talon finished walking to the hangar area that the flight deck officer had guided her to. About the time she stepped closer to the mobile suit, the cockpit hatch opened, and she saw Andrea climbing out and starting to ride the zip line down to the deck. Ari noticed she was wearing the blue flight suit she'd seen Katani pilots wearing. Her red hair was tied back except for the long braids she kept after passing her knighthood trials, and her lightsaber was right there by her side as she landed gently on the deck. Even though I heard it, Ari said as she greeted Andrea with a hug, I just couldn't believe your dad would let you fly into this until I saw you come out of the cockpit. Well, he decided to train me a little more in handling her after I had to fly cover for you as we were leaving Ryloth that time, Andrea told her, reminding Ari of the time she and Dylan had been kidnapped by the Guild, along with Ari's grandson, Turlon. It's good to have you here, Ari told her as they walked out of the hangar. Stefan moved slowly through his kata in Firebird's cargo hold. Mick had it emptied so everyone on board could have space to practice before they got to Renvar. And that was what he felt he needed to do, using a wooden bokken instead of his lightsaber. With each movement, he dove deeper and deeper into the Force. It got to the point where he could feel a charge around him as he drew more. So, this is how it was when Mick drew on it. I should have begun studying this a long time ago, he thought to himself. His movements were fluid as he moved around the hold with precise control. Even in the middle of all this, he knew a set of eyes were on him as he completed the kata. No request for a spar? He asked the person watching. I didn't want to break your kata just for me, Callista said as she walked up to him. I feel it is a lesson unto itself. You should be resting, Stefan told her as they exited the hold. He put the boken back where he had retrieved it from on his way in. As should you, she told him. I feel that it will be a trying battle. It will be, he answered. It will be indeed. All right, you two, Mick called from the cockpit. We've got a few hours until reversion. His feet were up on the console as he leaned back in the worn nerf hide command chair. This cockpit was as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. The ship spoke quietly to him through the quiet rumble of the Firebird's engines and the myriad beeps and tones from the instrument panels. Finn's word as they circulated fresh air throughout the ship. They had 5 hours until reversion into the Renvara system. The command crew should be sleeping, or at least trying to. He'd cleared out the crew quarters in the early morning hours. They hadn't seen use in nearly 50 years. Einar and Stefan were bunked in the forward cabin, while Callista and Zan shared the slightly more spacious aft quarters. As sleep began to envelop him, Mick ran thought back to the last communication from Ari. The fleet had gathered at the predetermined rendezvous coordinates as Ari issued her battle orders. Then the small task force assigned to Renvara jumped one way as the Endor fleet jumped the other, but not before Ari shot a private message to those heading for the Sith. Friends, comrades, Rogue, she had said. The battle you face at Renvar may be the deciding factor in this war. With you, we send a spear into the head of the beast. You are all volunteers, and our hearts go with you. Fight hard, fight smart, and know that we are doing the same across the galaxy. Soldiers, I'm handing battle command over to a Jedi Master, Stefan Card. Follow his orders as though they were my own. My last order to you is to return. Return that we might all share a victory toast over the bodies of those who threatened the peace we've all worked so hard to maintain. The image panned back to reveal Ari in her flight suit, standing before Archangel with the Ascension cable in her hand. We go to war on 2 fronts. May the Force be with us all. Even through the distortion of the hypercom, Mick caught her wink, and the tiny gesture warmed him from the inside out. Before sleep did take him, Mick stretched out in the Force. I love you, Princess, he said. I'll be seeing you after. Hey, Espresso, welcome in. Welcome in. Thoris Sounder, mobile suit hanger. May the Force be with us all, Ari said inaudibly. She sent another message. I love you, Rogue. The tech holding the holocam saluted and went back to his previous duties. With a squeeze of her hand, Ari started the zipline and rode it up to Archangel's cockpit. The suit was indeed a thing of beauty. Nib and Stefan had outdone themselves once again. Her sleek lines belied her incredible power, not entirely unlike her pilot. Ari climbed into the harness, strapped herself in, and began to complete her systems checks. Once her comm unit lit green, she keyed up command. This is General Din, issuing a full combat readiness order. All hands to battle stations, flight groups on standby for deployment. Phoenix Squadron, we're first out the gate. Everyone else deploy as planned. Colonel Maxwell, the command is now yours. May the Force be with us. Affirmations rang throughout her headset, and she keyed back to Phoenix Squad's tactical frequency. 30 minutes to reversion, she said. Call them as they come. Phoenix 7, came Kate's answer. There was a reason she was one of the best. All systems green. 13, here, Andre calmed in from Blue Talon. Good to go. The rest of the squadron calmed in as their suits came online. Ari silently prepared herself for the battle to come. She quieted her mind and tapped into the endless wellspring of the Force. Unconsciously, she touched the medallion at her neck. Not relying on luck, she told herself, but a little wouldn't hurt. Welcome in, Espresso. And thank you for the follow. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but I appreciate anybody who follows and lurks to listen. That's why we're here. I appreciate each and every one of you for keeping me company this evening. The Firebird. Mick was awake before Stefan had entered the cockpit. Is Einar going to be ready for this? The rogue asked. I think so. Stefan nodded as he took the co-pilot's chair. Oh, sorry. We talked last night. He's on his way up now. As though summoned at the mention of his name, Einar appeared in the cockpit's doorway. Mikron nodded to the Jedi as Einar sat at the navigator station. Zan and Callista are on station in the gun turrets. Good, Mick said. I don't know if we should be expecting much action in space, but I've got all ships in the task force on alert for reversion anyway. He keyed up the comm. Everyone know their assignments? Roger that. Zan and Callista answered nearly simultaneously. Eerie, Mick shuddered. It's like they're a couple or something. Stefan chuckled, and even Einar allowed a small smile. Well, I suppose there's nothing else for it, Mick shrugged. 5 minutes to reversion. May the Force be with us. Thoris Sounder. She stood at the MagCon field, 12 mobile suits arrayed behind her, each pilot handpicked to spearhead the attack. They were the best, and being the best meant getting the most challenging jobs. The Bothans knew they were coming. They had time to set up their own defenses. What they were looking at was no easy battle. Arrayed against them was a fleet of mobile suits backed by small galactic military's defense platforms and battle stations. They'd made Endor their base of operations as a stab at the rebellion. Now, the New Republic would stab back. Ari would be plunging into the heart of the Bothan and Zadi formation with her unit. They'd blast through and keep diving. The goal was the command center on Endor's forest moon. Strike the head and the body will fall soon after. It would not be an easy ride. She looked into her rear HUD and saw the suit standing there, ready. A smile touched her lips and a familiar feeling crept across her consciousness. The phoenix stirred within her, sensing the battle to come. She relished its touch, and her smile turned into a predatory grin. The Bothans may have known they were coming, but nothing would prepare them for this. It had been far too long since she'd flown in combat. She would show the Bothans why it was terrible for them to provoke her. The mottled sky outside the MagCon field turned to starlines, then stars, and the Phoenix burned brightly within Ari. Phoenix Squadron. Launch. Jedi Task Force. Renvar. Scopes read negative for hostiles, the voice buzzed through the command open comm. Copy that, Stefan replied from the co-pilot's chair. Prepared to take the secondary jump on my mark. He turned to Einar at the navigator's station, who held up 5 fingers, then 4, signaling the countdown. Stefan looked to Mick, whose hand was poised above the hyperdrive actuator. 2, 1, mark. Starlines flared, and a heartbeat later snapped back to pinpoints of light. Renvar hung ominously out the forward viewport. All ships, form up in your assigned flights, Stefan ordered. The LZ is marked, the operation is go. With those words, the ships and their small task force lurched forward, the Firebird outpacing the pack by a good 15 seconds. The acceleration momentarily pushed all aboard back into their seats as the inertial compensators fought to negate the G-forces. She's got some kick, Mick said with a grin. I noticed. Stefan arched an eyebrow at the rogue and then turned to the internal comm system. Callista, Zan, head aft and prepare for hot drop. The clunking of Beskar-armored footsteps on the deck sole could be heard echoing up the corridor. Stefan turned to Mick. You too, Mikron. I do hope you know what you're doing. Well, if Zan and Callie do their part, my job should be easy. The rogue shrugged as he made his way to the cockpit hatch. I meant your deployment method, Stefan replied as he took control of the Firebird. Dashing heroics aside, this could very well kill you. Just keep her low, level, and fast, Mick winked. Dashing heroics are my stock in trade. The Katani shook his head and returned to the task of piloting Corellians. Aboard the Firebird. Suited up in a form-fitting cold-weather combat suit, Mick waited at the service ramp with Callista and Zan. The Arctic wind howled as the landscape flashed by below. 2 minutes to your drop, Mick said over the headset comm in his tactical helmet. Remember, nothing fancy, just hit hard and make lots of noise, then get the hell back to the main LZ. Roger that, Zan replied. Good hunting. The Mandalorian's target was a vehicle hangar just south of the command tower. That was Mick's target. The plan was to drop the two at low altitudes where they would ride their jetpacks down to target and rain the complex with thermal detonators, blaster fire, and whatever else they had in their impressive arsenal. Stefan would then pull the Firebird into a steep climb over the command tower. The plan was to make the enemy think that the Mandalorians were the only drop, and the Firebird's mad climb would be the pilot jetting out on an escape vector. 2 Mandalorians with jetpacks would be easy to track in the blinding snowstorm. They hoped the enemy wouldn't notice a third unpowered descent moments later. With luck, Mick would breach the tower and destroy the command center before the Sith would hit them. That was the plan, anyway. Dashing, heroic, absolutely out of my criffing mind. The rogue stifled a laugh. Drop point in 3, he calmed. 2, 1, go, go, go. Give me a second. I know. I'm working on it. I may not actually have a mod this evening. Give me a second. I'm working on it. There we go. Sorry about the interruption. One of my mods was actually working on just that. So apologies for the interruption. Yeah, I don't think I have a mod right now. So we'll just work with that. I will deal with it after. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I'll have to deal with that after. Thanks for the heads up. Yeah, I will deal with that later. I know, so ridiculous. So crazy. Like, I know who's supposed to be here, so yes. Alright. Where was I? Ah, yes. We were hot dropping our Mandalorians. Yes. And is anybody... Oh, good. Yes, they left. But I snagged a screenshot of the list anyway. Just for one of my mods to deal with later. But thank you for the heads up. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I try to be really careful with all of the bots that show up. So, I don't know. Anyway. Yes, where were we? Ah, yes, we were hot dropping our Mandalorians into battle. There we go. Callista and Zan rocketed out the back of the Firebird, and Stefan began his climb. Mick waited for 2 heartbeats and then dove out the back and into the blinding white of the snowstorm. Plummeting through the air, he used the force to adjust his trajectory. The command tower rushed towards him with the speed of his freefall. The range to target on his tactical helmet's HUD ticked off hundreds of meters by the second. He pulled 2 thermal detonators from his back pouch and armed them. With a nudge from the force, he hurled them ahead at the transparent steel skylight atop the tower. The explosion was close enough to buffet McRon in his freefall. The rogue pushed down, drawing on the force deeper than he had in a long time. His descent slowed, and he rotated to pass through the shattered remains of the skylight feet first. His booted feet hit hard durasteel, and he rolled forward, coming up with his lightsaber lit and ready. They'll be fine. Bodies lay broken and shredded around the blast zone of mixed detonators. The station crew slumped over consoles with shards of transparent steel lodged into their backs, but not all inside the tower were dead. Hands guided by the force, the rogue sliced through 2 Sith guards as they stumbled through the lingering smoke. He could sense 4 more nearby. He dashed towards the exit doors, clearing the smoke and coming into full view of the 2 Sith guarding the portal. On their faces was a mixture of shock and rage. They used the anger to fuel their attacks. Orange and blue lightsabers leaped into existence as they charged the rogue. McRun blocked Blue's wild overhead swing, batting it aside as he sidestepped to face Orange head-on. Blue's momentum carried him past Mick, and he staggered into a computer terminal. Orange fainted high, but too slow. As he swung toward his intended target, McRon slipped inside his attack and around behind him, drawing his blaster as he did so. Using Orange as a temporary shield, the rogue fired off 3 rapid shots at Blue. Blue parried the bolts, sending all but 1 back the way they came. Caught off guard, Orange took both deflected bolts straight to the chest. Blue stood, face contorted into a mask of rage until it slackened with death a second later. Mick appeared behind him, a line appearing on the Sith's neck. The line widened as the head separated from the body and both fell to the floor. Mick could sense the other 2 Sith were on the opposite side of the large blast doors. He rushed to the controls and locked down the room. Heavy durasteel shields slammed down around the already thick doors. Mick blasted the controls for good measure before holstering his sidearm. He glanced around the control room, his helmet's rudimentary scanning and the force telling him that no one else lived. With a nod, the rogue shut down his blade and set to work. He planted shaped charges around the room on vital structural points and computer equipment. His task complete, he went to a window and sliced out a roughly oval-shaped hole in the transparent steel. He took hold of the cutout plate and turned back to look at the room. With a nod, he set the timers ticking and dove out the window with his makeshift board. 3 seconds later, the explosion hit, sending rubble and debris hurtling through the air and inky black smoke swirling on the snowy winds. With some difficulty, Mick got his board under his feet and grabbed at it with the force. Still hundreds of meters up, he nudged himself forward with the force and set his sights on a group of inky black dots heading for the task force's forward LZ. At 10 meters up, Mick picked his target and pushed off from his board into a spiraling leap ahead of the group. The chunk of transparent steel rocketed into the lead Sith's back, nearly slicing the unsuspecting warrior in half. Mick's booted feet sank deep into the snow ahead of the group. He faced them, and their charge faltered. From behind the rogue, 24 blaster bolts lanced out at the small group of Sith. Some were deflected, but the concentrated fire brought them all down. Mick turned and removed his helmet. Stefan and Einar marched at the head of a combined unit of soldiers and Jedi Knights. "Good," Stefan called out over the wind. "You're alive." "And the defenses?" Mick asked, turning back to look towards the smoking tower. Einar strained to hear his earpiece comlink. After a few seconds, he nodded. "Down, for the moment," he said. "There's no telling how long before they can bring a backup system online." "Zan and Callie?" The rogue searched the white skies for any signs of jetpack exhaust. "They were on their way," Stefan said. "They ran into some trouble on the way back, but it was nothing they couldn't handle, apparently." "Good," Mick nodded. "Orders, Stefan?" We're going to do a little bit of scene skipping, so I apologize. Just a little bit. Go, go, go! Stefan waited just a moment before he started to pull up on the Firebird's controls. He didn't go for a hard pull and flipped the bird on her back as he passed over the tower. As soon as he passed over the top, he started an inverted dive, rotating slightly and going into a gentle bank as he cleared the tower. He didn't need a confirmation from Mick that he made it down safely. He noticed explosions on his scanners as he rejoined the rest of the transports at the landing zone. Within a few moments, the Firebird landed and Stefan shut down the systems. He had gone with a layer of thermal garb underneath his robes. Seeing Bane's troops with pieces of armor in his vision, he had had the Jedi make their own preparations. Stefan's own touch was a set that he had Dylan bring from their home on Catan. It was a breastplate of Catani design with 2 sets of plates to protect his upper legs dangling from it. He didn't have the shoulder pieces attached to the upper straps, but had a set that protected his forearms and upper and the back of his hands wrapped over his outer kimono. His outer robe was replaced with a sleeveless variant to give him more freedom of motion and not hamper the armor plates. No, I'm glad I stopped when I did, because we're in an ad. Sorry. Ad break. So sorry. Good night, Sigma. Rest well. You're very welcome. I appreciate you coming by. Sleep well. I'm waiting out the ad. We got another 35 seconds. Try not to read during those because I know a lot of people aren't subscribed. But it gives me a chance to stretch and drink some water. And if anybody is interested, I do have some commands down in my About panels that you can use if you desire. They're nothing fancy, mostly self-care things for me. Remind me to drink water, have a stretch, various other things. So, have a look at those, and if you're interested, feel free to use them. I do have it set up so that I will see a list of your redeems here on my OBS, so I will see them. I'm actually going to turn the music down because it got loud again. I'm fighting with volumes. There we go. Okay. His outer robe was replaced with a sleeveless version to give him more freedom of movement and not hinder the armor plates. The set was old, composed of Mandalorian iron having been made over 1,000 years ago. It was the armor of Johan Card, who had lived and fought against the Sith under Exar Kun millennia ago. He felt it appropriate to wear it here. We're gathered and ready, Dylan said as he met him at the bottom of the boarding ramp. He was the only one of the boys that Stefan had allowed to be here for this. Rhaenys was too young. Let's get moving, Stefan said as he looked towards the Citadel. We've got a long road ahead of us. Endor. The combined firepower over Endor was beyond all comprehension. Bothan and Anzadi, with their Hellfire suits, complete with different fighter types, combined with all of the cruisers of their combined fleet and mixed it up with the New Republic forces. Ari led the assault force in Archangel, with all White Falcon mobile suits breaking in pairs behind her. The New Republic and Katani forces augmented them by pairing up their entire force of X-Wings, Z-Wings, B-Wings, and the new Katani Nighthawks and older Warbird fighters. The historian who sat in a small console on CSS Valkyrie's bridge was struck with awe at the fast maneuvers of the mobile suits and the fighters combined with all the powerful slugging matches between both fleets. He'd seen holo footage from Home 1, Admiral Akbar's legendary flagship from the original Battle of Endor. This felt much larger. It looked like an orchestrated ballet to him. Among all of these mobile suits, there was one that sped through the entire battle with it as the words. I cannot words today. Among all of these mobile suits, there was one that sped through the battle with its escort of Nighthawks. It was shifting focus between crippling capital ships all over the battlefield and destroying any enemy mobile suit that it came in within its firing range. It was Blue Talon. Stefan had trained her as much as he could, using simulators and putting her in orbit to face combat drones. This was still something else to Andrea Card as she settled her crosshairs on the next Hellfire that tried to sneak up on her. She had tuned Blue Talon's sensors to alert her every moment that the Bothan-designed suit entered her weapons range. This one took a proton torpedo to the head, crippling it by depriving the pilot of all his visual scanners. He wouldn't be able to see to pilot now. "Still with me, Hawklead?" she asked as she went on to the next target, an aging cruiser. "Right with you, milady," came the answer from her fighter escort, Commander Wesley Danik of the Valkyrie's Black Hawk Squadron. "We just cleaned up that suit's escort and picked up 2 more suits coming up slowly. They must be wondering if you're worth taking on." "I'd hate to think that I'm not worth the attention," she said, making a little humor out of all the chaos as she flew a shadow torpedo with the force into the cruiser's engines. The brilliant explosion sheared the aft section, and she flew the suit through the explosion, her escort meeting her on the other side. "I hope everything is going well on Renvar," she thought to herself. Renvar. Stefan spotted the 2 Sith adepts first, signaling the troops with them to open fire on the pair. Didn't take long, and it wouldn't be much longer. The Sith had to know they were there by now. "Good," Stefan called over the wind to Mikron, still standing. "You're alive." Stefan was about to answer Mikron when he heard the war cry over the sound of the wind. Knowing what to expect, he looked in the direction of the citadel overhead and saw the group of Sith starting to form. One raised a blood-red lightsaber over his head. "Form up," he said as they started moving forward. He slowly drew his lightsaber, its blue-silver blade coming alive with an aggressive snap hiss. "It all starts here." He saw the flashing red light arc through the air. He saw the puff of snow as the small cylindrical object hit the ground. He saw the nearest Jedi to the device was Turlon. Gripped with a sudden sense of desperation and need, Mikron Din drew deeper still on that eternal wellspring of the Force. His eyes glowed white with electricity, and his force push sent the 5 Sith trying to engage him, sailing through the air. He dashed to Turlon's side, his speed cutting a path of clear ground and air through the blizzard that hammered Renvar. Mikron's lightsaber leaped out, catching the Sith adept that Turlon was dueling with at neck level. Before that opponent realized he was dead, Turlon even registered Mick's presence, and the rogue used the Force to levitate the boy back into the ranks of Jedi behind him. That was when the detonator went off. Through the Force, Mikron felt the ignition sequence. He could almost see the atoms within on a collision course with each other. The energy built and exploded outward, instantly vaporizing the snow around it. Mikron reached out and grabbed hold of the intense energy through the Force. He drew it into himself, channeling the explosion into his very being. The cloth lining the outer plates of his armor burned away, charring the cortosis-laced durasteel beneath, and still he drew it deeper. He could feel his body temperature rising. The lightning in his eyes spread and leaped from his body to the ground. He had to loose the power coursing through him or risk burning his body from the inside out. Through the Force, he felt a large collection of Sith cresting a hill just south of his position in an old AT-AT walker. The thing lumbered into view, and Mikron grinned. He latched onto the mechanical monstrosity with the Force and could hear its gears strain as it was locked firmly in place. Then the rogue gave it a shove. The massive walker toppled over end like a child's toy thrown in a fit of rage. Its limbs flew off in all directions as its body rolled across the snow-covered ground. Sith warriors tried to leap out of its path. Some made it. Others were not so lucky. The corpse finally came to rest at the base of the citadel. The impact of its hull against the stone shook the great spire from base to tip. The lightning faded, and Mick heard the Jedi and New Republic forces cheer. Blaster rifles fired with renewed vigor into the stunned masses of Sith and their slaves. Turlon rushed to his grandfather's side. "Grandpa," he called over the howling winds, "you saved my life!" "Battle awareness, kid," the rogue said. "Don't get so focused on the opponent in front of you that you lose sight of the bigger picture." "Yes, sir," Turlon said. "I will." "Do you ever do anything that isn't over the top?" Stefan yelled as he and Einar came to a running stop. "There was a—" Mick began to explain. "Never mind that." Einar cut him off. "We've got our hole." "You're with us, Micron," Stefan said, fixing his eyes on the path of destruction the walker had created. "We're going up that corridor before it closes again, and we're getting inside." "Roger that." Mick nodded, setting his feet and tapping into the Force once more. "Who's leading the task force while you're gone?" "Zan and Callista," Einar answered. "Turlon, you stick with them and follow orders. Stay sharp out there." "I will," Turlon began to say, but the trio of masters had shot off already at a forced-enhanced run. "Master," he finished. Archangel and the suits of Phoenix Squadron tore through the combined Bothan and Anzadi ranks with a fierceness that gave their enemies pause. Their trail of destruction traced a line of broken mobile suits, snub fighters, capital ships, and a defense platform from the front lines to the Forest Moon itself. R8 streamlined Archangel's wings as she plummeted through the atmosphere. "Phoenix Squadron," she calmed. "Break by pairs, run ground scans for the biggest energy source on the moon. It should be the command center. Phoenix 10 through 13, cover our exit vector." Affirmations rang through her headset, and she saw 4 of her squad break off their descent to fly patrol over their escape route. Kate and Andrea would keep the lane clear. Silently, Ari sent them strength through the Force. Ranging shots leaped up from several locations on the ground. They flashed harmlessly by as the suits of Phoenix Squadron continued their dive. 1 flight has north, Ari calmed, 2 south, 3 east. Her pilots confirmed, and the 3 flights broke off for their targets. The ground-placed lasers would be near critical structures. If lucky, they'd lead the Phoenix Squadron directly to the command center. Ari's HUD beeped urgently, and she glanced at her scanners. 15 red dots rose from the forest floor, 5 clicks ahead of her position. 1 flight, she said. "We have company. Engage at will. Keep ground scans running." "Roger that, lead," Brink calmed from Phoenix 2. "Let's cook 'em." Renvar. The ancient doors of the citadel were huge, carved from some black wood that Mick knew was not native to the planet. And they were barred closed. Glyphs and symbols covered the thick black wood, and their exact meaning the 3 could only guess. Their intent, however, was clear. "So much darkness," Einar said, "and fused into the dead wood. I don't think mere explosives will gain our entry." "Stuff's too thick to hack through," Mick said with a nod, "and we don't have time." Stefan's eyes were closed, and an expression of concentration and concern crossed his face. "South. There's a passage through the rock," he said. "It's heavily guarded." "Oh, good," Mick grinned. "I almost thought they'd run out." The trio bolted for the rock passage, and Mick could sense the forces waiting for them there. Indeed, there were many of them, and stronger in the Force than any they'd yet encountered. Mick's jaw set in a grim determination, and as they rounded the last corner, he began to fall deeper into the Force. Together, they charged a sea of black, their cries carrying over the battlefield on the winds of Renvar. And that is the end of chapter 16. I know that there's a lot going on in that chapter, and for those of you who were not here the last 15, you might be confused. So please feel free to ask any questions, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. We're going to take a little break from reading, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And I'm just going to take a break and get a drink of water. I've been talking a lot, so just wanted to make sure that I'm staying hydrated as I do that. And I forgot to turn on my closed captioning, but that's okay. I can do that shortly here, but it would be a little weird to be starting it mid-stream. Alrighty. I should be hydrated enough to continue. Chapter 17. They reached the line simultaneously. Mick centered with Stefan on the right and Einar on the left. With each swing, block, and move, the three fought almost as one as one Sith warrior after another came up the line, as one of their comrades had fallen. Stefan sidestepped right to avoid a thrust and countered by tightly gripping the Sith wrist and yanking him further off balance, which put him right into the path of Mick's downward strike. Mick backed up to avoid the next attack. In Stefan's opinion, the Sith had done a near-perfect downward cut, but Mick's backing up let it pass through the air, allowing Stefan to step into the gap. The Katani's blade swept upwards in an arc that split the Sith from shoulder to hip. Mick spun around and picked off a Sith who had tried to get in behind Einar's defenses. Einar, not losing his focus, took the corpse and hurled it with the force to knock three others who were preparing to charge them. "We're dropping them, but we're not making much headway here," Mick said as he looked to see more coming in. "Every time I take one down," Einar said as he cut down yet another one, 2 or 3 more come up to fill the gap. "Any ideas, fellas?" Mick asked as he parried a strike and responded with a thrust that went through not only his current opponent but also a Sith that had started to run up behind him. "Hammer blow with everything we can put behind it," Stefan said. Almost automatically, the three stepped back, drew their offhand back, and summoned as much power as possible in the time it took to outstretch their offhand. The combined power of all three masters sent a powerful whirlwind that parted the writhing mass of Sith the length of the tunnel. "Let's go," Mick said as they started to run down the tunnel past the suddenly disorganized warriors. It wouldn't take long, they knew, before the Sith would begin to swarm around behind them, but the sooner they got to their objective, the better. "They've gotten through the tunnel," Amron said as he entered the throne room of the Citadel. "There are only 3 of them," Idka protested as he stood up. It was immediately answered by Bane, backhanding him against the wall. "Do not underestimate them," Bane said with emphasis as his eyes bored into him. You know as much of card ability as any other warrior here. Don't get cocky." "He won't defeat me this time," the warrior said as he stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. "Go to your position," Bane commanded. "Card will fall into your hands soon enough." Itka bowed and left the room, leaving the 2 alone. "Call the rest here," Bane said to Amrond. "When you send your student out, rejoin me here. I will leave Algernon to you." "And the other one?" "Leave him to me." Endor. "They're starting to come down the pipe," Andrea said as Blue Talon's scanners started picking up a new wave of mobile suits and fighters forming and headed towards them. "And there's more behind them," Kate said, as more started forming from another vector. "Wes," Andrea said quietly over the comm. "I've already got backup coming in, milady." she heard from her escort. Something about his tone caught her attention, and she looked over to see sparks coming from his fighter. Wes, you're damaged. I'm just scorched, Danik told her. I'm still good to fight. Head back to the ship, Commander. With all due respect, Lady Card, he told her. I would rather stick it out by my princess. Indre couldn't help but smile at the sentiment. Stretching her feelings out, she could tell his loyalty was fierce, and she didn't want to face Edward if anything happened. Oh, and he didn't want to face Edward if anything happened. Heads up, here they come. As the first wave approached firing range, Kate said, Split it up a little. Black Hawk 9, Danik called to Kate's lead escort. Watch the fighters closely. They're starting to get more aggressive. I'm on it, Hawk 9 said, as she closed up with Kate's mobile suit. Renvar. Dylan quickly spun around and drove his blade down through the Sith that he had been facing. He turned to prepare to face yet another, and saw Falk glaring at him from a few paces away, lightsaber already out and lit. They looked at each other for a few moments. Does it have to be this way? Dylan couldn't help but ask. You are a good person, inside, Falk. You don't have to walk down the same path Walt took. It was as if mentioning his brother's name set him off. Falk charged at him so quickly that Dylan almost didn't get his lightsaber up in time to block. Oblivious to all of the others fighting around them, the two locked into a duel. Dylan knew that this was nothing like the spars that they had gone through together at the Shunderland Academy. Only one of them would walk away from this one. The three masters left a trail of Sith bodies behind them as they made their way into the central chamber of the Citadel. Standing in front of the throne was Bane. I must congratulate you on getting this far, he said with a feral grin. Stefan. Bane, Stefan said as they stood apart from one another. He started to lunge but was surprised when Bane lifted his hand, and then it hit him. Hard. The hammer blow the Sith Lord had summoned was stronger than the three had pulled in the tunnel. The force of it hurled Stefan through the air, over Mick and Einar's heads as they ducked, and it threw him through the glass and down the outside of the tower. Stefan! Mick yelled, turning as he heard new noises. Another Sith joined Bane, focusing on Einar and more adepts that started to encircle all of them. He looked over at Bane as the Sith Lord pulled a lightsaber, surprised when a black blade erupted from the handle. He pointed it at Mick and moved it up quickly in a taunting gesture. I've been looking forward to this for some time. That makes two of us, Mick said as he ran forward. The Sith Lord brought his blade down with such ferocity that, even though Mick had time enough to block, it knocked the rogue back and made his hands go partially numb. Bane stood a good head taller than Micron and was built like a professional shockball player. He radiated dark energy like a beacon, his strength and connection with the Force growing with each step he took towards Mick. An adept brushed Mick from the side. The rogue was focused on Bane, but a silver blade leaped out and caught the adept in the throat. The Sith went down, gurgling. I will enjoy this, Bane said. His voice rumbled, backed by the power of the Force coursing through his veins. I sense great power in you. It has been too long since I have tested myself. You really should get a doctor to do that. Mick cut him off as he charged. The rogue crossed the distance in an instant, his silver blade lashing out left again, and then right. The Dark Lord caught each blow, riposting and thrusting towards Mick's exposed chest. Micron ducked the blows, the airy black light passing just above his left shoulder, and brought his own blade up in an arc to catch Bane's extended arm at the elbow. The Sith Lord caught Mick's wrist in his right hand and threw the rogue across the room. Aided by the Force, Bane's throw sent Mick sailing through the air, hurtling towards the wall of the Citadel. Reacting instinctually, Mick twisted through a flip that put his feet on the wall. With a nudge from the Force, the rogue kicked off and dove back towards Bane. He pulled his lightsaber back for a swing that would cut the Sith from shoulder to hip, but feinted instead. As Bane moved to block the swing that wouldn't come, Micron summoned a hammer blow through the Force and pushed with both hands in front of him. The effort stopped the rogue's forward momentum, his feet hitting the ground as the blow connected with the Sith Lord. Bane was lifted from the ground and flew back into an adept meters away. The Dark Lord angrily struck down the hapless Sith and glared at the rogue. Micron had no taunt, no glib remark to give Bane. His opponent was nothing like the rogue had ever faced, and the seriousness of the situation robbed Micron of all but his focus. He pulled deeper on the Force, falling into the chaotic maelstrom as it whirled about the citadel. His eyes glowed white, and the hair on the back of his arm stood up with the energy flowing into and through him. Bane charged, and Micron let the Force and his actions move in tandem with the rhythm of the fight. The Sith Lord's assault battered the rogue from all angles, his attacks too fast to track with the naked eye. Micron continued to fall deeper still, and each block came faster than the last. The power of the Force swirling around the two combatants kicked up rocks and dust in a whirlwind that encompassed the throne room. A Sith adept screamed, dropping to his knees and clutching his head, the sheer power in the room overwhelming him. However, Micron didn't notice it. His universe was focused on his opponent, on the tendrils of Force energy weaving in and out of him. The stone chair upon the dais cracked at its base, and the throne floated into the air. It came in at Micron's back with such speed that pieces flew off the granite chair with the friction of the wind. Mid-block, the rogue threw himself into a backward somersault that carried him over the 2-ton projectile. Bane dodged his own attack, and the throne careened through the stone wall of the throne room. Snow flew in on Arctic wind, and the howling grew louder. Bane pressed the attack, and deeper still, Mick fell. The rogue blocked a blow high outside and rotated his blade to bind the Sith Lord's saber. Weapons locked to make through a powerful Force-aided uppercut at Bane's jaw. The Dark Lord turned his head in time to catch the blow on his cheek. Blood and teeth flew from Bane's mouth as he staggered back, and Mick pressed the attack. A slash at the Sith's right shoulder found purchase as his black blade was a fraction of a second late, blocking. Smoke rose from the wound, and the Dark Lord howled in pain. Bane gestured with both hands. The floor shook with the effort of his push. Mick saw it coming and threw everything he had into a counter-push. His feet dug into the stone of the throne room floor as the opposing forces pushed on each other and pushed their controllers back with the effort. Pushed back 5 meters apart, the two were locked in a stalemate. The floor beneath the center point of their opposing pushes began to crack and buckle. Micron continued to draw deeper and deeper on the Force. Sith adepts near the rogue and Bane backed away, fear widening their eyes. The rogue could feel he was near the edge, that indefinable terminus line between the living and fully giving himself over to the Force. It felt like dying. He'd pushed as far as he'd ever pushed before, and as the strain of his prolonged effort began to wear on him, he felt a moment of doubt. He'd never before let go completely, and he wasn't sure what would happen if he did. In the fraction of a second that the rogue doubted, he knew that he had already failed. His push faltered, then vanished altogether. Time stood still, and Bane's wicked smile burned into the rogue's memory. The wall of Force power hit Micron like a cargo hauler at full tilt. He felt a rib crack at it as his feet left the ground, and he was hurled through the air. His back hit the wall at the far end of the room. Stone cracked and mortar fell, and his vision went black. Bane's laughter echoed over the sound of lightsabers clashing as Einar fought Amrond and the few remaining adepts. Bane paid them no heed. He stalked towards the slumped rogue. Micron could barely breathe, but his Force senses were fully alert. He could feel Bane's approach, taunting laughter and wicked joy. He'd bested the biggest threat to his new empire. He would enjoy snuffing the life of this short-lived anomaly. The Dark Lord stood above Mick. The rogue could hear his breathing and feel his heartbeat, and then he saw her. He saw Ari, and what would become of her if he died. She thrashed in the confines of her mobile suit, her anger and despair unleashed upon all that fell into her sights. Jedi, comrades, enemies, and friends fell before her like so many bugs. The phoenix, once a bright beacon of light, morphed into a being of darkness and rage. Its fire burned Ari from the inside out, her eyes wide with fear and anger. The Sith Lord was projecting these images into the rogue's mind, meaning to torture his prey. Like most Sith, however, he hadn't taken into account the love that Micron had for his wife. The resolve that hardened his will, sharpened his senses, and drove him to the impossible to keep her from coming to harm. Micron would not allow the images to come true. In a heartbeat, the rogue took that last step over the line. He let go of himself and allowed the Force to rush into and through him, holding nothing back and trusting completely. It was as though the floodgates had been opened. Bane's smile vanished as the rogue opened his eyes and gazed up at the Sith Lord. Fear fueling his effort, the Dark Lord raised his hand and sent volley after volley of Force lightning at his foe. Ooh. And it's a good thing that I stopped there, because we're in an ad. Nope. Sorry. Ad break. Everybody take a drink. Time to hydrate. Okay. I'm going to take an opportunity to take my meds. Since I don't have a mod to remind me, I'm going to go ahead and take it now. I'm just waiting for the ad break to finish. I really try not to read during this. Alright, and we're back from ads. Alrighty. Bane's smile vanished as the rogue opened his eyes and gazed at the Sith Lord. Fear fueling his effort, the Dark Lord raised his hand and sent volley after volley of Force lightning at his foe. Micron's hand shot out, and he allowed the energy to flow through him, using it to heal his broken bones and give his body the strength to stand. Bane stopped his onslaught and stepped back from the rogue, bringing his lightsaber to guard again. "What are you?" he bellowed, his rage growing with each passing second that Micron stood before him. "I am Micron Din," the rogue answered, the words coming from somewhere outside of him. "Conduit of the Force." Bane charged, then, bringing his blade down in a crushing blow that would split a mountain. Faster than he'd ever moved before, Micron sidestepped the Dark Lord's charge, grabbed his shoulder with one hand, placed his other on the small of his back, and pushed. Having traded places with the rogue, Bane flew headlong into the wall where he had thrown Mick. Weakened by the previous impact, the stone and mortar collapsed utterly, and Bane flew into the open air and the snow beyond. But he was not beaten yet. Mick could sense his outrage, and it kept the Sith Lord strong. Already he had altered his ballistic course to land on a ledge of the mountain outside, seething. Mick looked over his shoulder to see Aenir holding his own. Without speaking, two thoughts passed between the masters. "Have you got this? Go!" Micron's lightsaber flew back into his hand, and the conduit dove out of the hole in the wall of the citadel. Alrighty. Endor. Target acquired. Taking the shot. An explosion ripped through the forest floor 10 clicks south of Ari's position. Her HUD registered enemy communications disabled, and the planetary shields were falling rapidly. "Good shooting, 10. Ari calmed as she ripped through the Bothan mobile suit with her beam saber. "Squadron, form up on the escape vector, regroup and rejoin the main battle." A chorus of cheers rang through her headset, and Ari allowed a slight smile as she reoriented Archangel towards space. Her smile quickly vanished as her HUD displayed the situation looming ahead of them. Only Kate and Andrew remained of the 4 suits she'd left behind to protect the escape route, and they were quickly being overrun. "Squadron, all speed for my mark," she ordered, kicking Archangel's impressive drive system into full gear. "Regroup on targets, burn down those Bothans." She didn't hear the acknowledgments. She didn't need to. She pushed her suits to its limits and beyond as she watched the range to target tick slowly by. She saw several torpedoes slam into Kate's mobile suit, staggering the warrior. 3 enemies fell to her beam cannon, 2 more to her saber. Sparks shot out from numerous joints on her suit, but Kate Stryker fought on, and beautifully. Never before had Ari seen such grace in combat, but it wouldn't last. Ari glanced again at her ranged target and cursed bitterly. She shunted power from her shield into her engines and was rewarded with a boost, but it was too late. "Punch out, Kate!" Ari screamed. "Punch out!" The combined firepower of 7 enemy mobile suits converged on Kate Stryker, and one of the New Republic's brightest stars faded from the fight. Ari had tried to keep her distance from her pilots. A good leader couldn't fall to pieces when, not if, one of them died. But Kate had proven too good a pilot, too good a friend, to keep her death from hitting Ari in the gut like a hammer blow. The Phoenix cried out, echoing Ari's anguish and turning her despair into fiery resolve. Ari was in the enemy formation a heartbeat later, after the lights went out in Kate's suit. The enemy fell before her, one after the other, as Ari danced and weaved among them. Her actions were fueled by the Force, and she became one with Archangel. Together they rained death upon the enemies who had thought to take Kate's life. The angel of death had come to the Bothans at last. Renvar. Cold. Stefan looked up from where he lay on the stone. Sorry. Words are hard. Stefan looked up from where he lay on the stone floor to the hole that he had made during his fall. The force push from Bane was unexpected and sent Stefan many meters down the outside of the tower. He only had enough time to come up with a hammer blow of his own to cave the stone roof below him that he was quickly approaching and try to cushion his fall. It had still rendered him unconscious, and he could tell as he tried to get up that he had injuries from the fall itself. "I'll have to get Callista to help me with these," he thought as he got up carefully and looked around. He didn't see them, but he could feel them now. "I would have stayed down if I were you," came a voice from in front of him. The figure it belonged to walked out of the shadows, lighting a red lightsaber. With him were several other warriors, but this was the one that caught Stefan's attention. He didn't wear as many robes as the others, and his face was tattooed to look like a living skull. But that wasn't really what got his attention. "I know that voice," Stefan said quietly, looking around to see how many were arrayed around them before turning to face the leader. "It's been a long time, Umbar." The figure hissed and pointed his blade at Stefan. "That name, that child, is dead, Stefan Card, and now you will be." "You sound so certain of that," Stefan said as he started to tap into the Force and get a sense of his opponents. Injured as he was, he knew he would have to face these warriors here, now, if he was to return to the Citadel to help Mick and Einar. "You're injured, Jedi," Idka said as he started leering at Stefan, "and you have no idea how long it has been since our last meeting." "Our last meeting was a sparring room on Chandrila, when we were both young men," Stefan said as he drew more on the Force, realizing that he would have to draw on the 7th form here completely. He could almost feel the charge that he had witnessed happening to Mick during their spar, so much so that he started to feel his wounds heal themselves without even focusing on it. The advantage of surprise would be his. "So this is what it's like. I should have started studying this years ago." "If you think You can all take me here and now, the Katani said as he stood straight as he could. Who's first? Dylan could feel it as he parried Falk's blow. Dad, Mick, they're both completely surrendering. Dear lady, their presence is almost like an explosion. It gave Dylan a feeling of renewed vigor. Falk could feel it as well and closed in to attack. Dylan blocked it away and countered, but got blocked himself. Falk tried to thrust his blade forward again, and Dylan could tell it was a move he had done before at the academy. Dylan blocked with his own blade and then pushed their two blades into a full circle before stepping to Falk's side, where he forced their blades to the ground. He then rolled over Falk's back and landed on the other side. His arms, and naturally his lightsaber, had continued the roll at a speed Falk couldn't counter in time. Dylan hesitated as he felt his strike hit his friend. He didn't look when he heard the body hit the ground. I'm sorry, my friend, he said as he searched for the next attacker, then stopped in his tracks. The sorrow hit him and almost overpowered him. Oh no. Einar. It was almost a blur. Stefan moved so fast to the Sith as left his hands taking hold of the Sith's wrists when he had tried to go for an overhead strike. He spun around, still holding his attacker's wrists and the lightsaber, parrying a strike from the one that had charged from the right side. A solid kick to the jaw sent him staggering back as Stefan flipped his initial attacker to the floor and drove his own blade into the man's stomach. Thank you. There we go. Another approached at the same time that Ika had charged. Stefan's hand flew to the lightsaber on his belt. The blue-silver blade came alive almost on its own and blocked Ika's. Stefan stretched out his left hand and called for a force push, which sent the other attacker flying back against the stone wall hard enough that Stefan heard a faint crack of his neck being broken. His next move was to grab Itka's wrist and flip him to the ground. Two other Sith had charged in from the front while the last tried to come up behind Stefan. Stefan jumped forward and rotated in a move that he had taught Andrea once before. Stretching his weapon hand out, he caught the first adept as he was in midair. The rotation spun him as he reached the top of the apex of his jump. As he came down, he rotated to face the one in front of him again. The force of his downward strike drove the Sith blade down into himself. When Idka shook off the effect of the throw from Stefan, he saw Stefan standing over him with the blade of his lightsaber leveled under his chin. Cautiously, he looked off to the side where his lightsaber lay against the ground. You wouldn't call it in time, Stefan said as he looked down at him. He almost wanted to shake his head. It had taken him only seconds to dispatch all of them. He left the room with his lightsaber still activated, but could tell that Ika was heading the other way, running. It surprised him. In those few seconds, he had utterly surrendered and could feel the effects. He was definitely charged and noted that his wounds had mostly healed. But then it hit him, harder than Bane's blow had been. 2 deaths at Endor. Oh no. Einar backhanded Amrond away and spun around to parry a strike from a Sith that had tried to attack from behind. And then the pain hit him. It was almost as bad as taking a blaster shot to the stomach. Kate, he whispered as he fell to his knees. Amrond, sensing this too, regrouped the remaining adepts and started to surround him. Kate, he whispered again, tears forming in his eyes. His mind flashed through every memory, the first meeting, the falling in love, Stefan holding their wedding at his home on Catan. All gone. Kate, he said, the anguish inside him becoming something else. He looked up at Amrond. It was a look that made the Sith take a step back in surprise. You, Einar whispered as he stood up and looked at all of them, are all going to die. And then he lunged. Stefan could sense it as he got back to the Citadel again. He knew where Mick and Bane were fighting outside, and Mick was pressing himself to break even. But it was Einar that worried him. He could sense him letting go, tell the path he was about to walk, and see that it had started when he went to save Callista back on Korriban. And Stefan had a choice to make: save his friend or stop Bane. "Callista," he called out to her in the Force. "Einar's in trouble. I need you and Zan in the throne room now." Bane had driven Mick down into the snow, and then he just stood there, leering at him. "Conduit," he said. "Having trouble?" His senses were so focused on Mick that he only caught a slight tremble of the attack. He turned, only to have Stefan's boot connect to his jaw and send him flying over Mick and into the snow himself. He rose angrily and looked across at Stefan, holding his lightsaber, definitely ready for a fight. "You didn't think you were going to get rid of me that easily, did you?" Stefan asked. And then he beckoned the Sith Lord forward in a "come here" gesture. For once, Callista was glad for the sealed environment of her Beskar. It at least kept the cold at bay. Shaking her mind free of the fleeting memories, she planted the last charge at the base of the giant turbo laser before she sprinted to join Zan. Her breathing was heavy as she slid to a stop, her finger hovering over the detonation control. "Fire in the hole," she said tersely over the comm, glad that the Jedi presence in the area was light. The next instant, the ground shook and a bright flash blossomed over the snow as they ducked behind a snowdrift. "Fairfek, nothing can be easy for just once in my criffing life," Zan complained. Surveying the scene around him, he had to admit that what on flimsy seemed a good idea turned out to be more complicated than he had originally thought. "Damn it, Calica, we're still 150 meters from the first of the turbolaser emplacements. Got any bright ideas?" For a moment, she frowned, chewing on her bottom lip. "I don't know, Zan. Does our Beskar have stealth capability? We don't have time to fight through this." Her frown deepened as she scanned the seething, thrashing mob that covered the snowy hillside, their sabers flashing in the dim light. "Nash, and even if they did, a turbolaser barrage cut out the rest of Zan's statement as he flung himself and his newlywed wife to the ground for cover. A few seconds later, the barrage stopped. He popped up again, wearing more snow than he had earlier. "It's too late now, given that they're keyed onto us." "Shasa," Callista swore, her eyes narrowing as she studied the offending piece of machinery as one would an insect. "I just had an idea, but you'll have to trust me and provide cover fire while I focus. Do you remember when I told you about my shielding ability? Typically, it's used to protect a person or persons, but I think I can use it to create a shield around the turbolaser itself." Now, generally, if it were anyone else other than Callista, Zan would have argued over the suicidal nature of the idea, but Callista had proven herself so many times to Zan in the short time that he'd known her that it would be foolish to question her now. "Fine, but that's temporary, Calica. We still need a way to take them out. We still don't know if they have orbital bombardment capability. Take it out if you can." She couldn't help but smile slightly as she caught the edge of Zan's thoughts. An instant later, she ducked for cover as another barrage boiled the snow only meters from their hiding place. When the barrage ceased, she chanced to glance towards the behemoth. "Well, if I put a shield around it, the lasers would rebound onto the emplacement itself, doing our job for us." She trailed off then, focusing on her task as she projected her consciousness, shrouding the nearest turbolaser in a barely visible wall of energy before the operator fired again. Zan nodded, but growled a warning, clearly not in a mood to be trifled with. "Just don't forget the shield generator. For all we know, Bane placed a surprise or two there if we get through the turbos." He pointed at the generator tower. "If you can take out the turbolasers, I'll handle that criffing thing." Just then, a missile blast echoed around them, totally taking out their left-hand flank. "See what I mean?" "Shasa," Callista hissed, ducking behind the snowdrift as she moved to better cover. "Sorry," she said quietly, trying to split her attention to protect them and focus on her task. The operator for the turbolaser got impatient, and having lost sight of them in the blowing snow, he pressed the firing control. But instead of a bolt leaping forward to immolate the snowdrift, the laser energy rebounded off Callista's shield and the turbolaser went up in a ball of flame. Callista grinned briefly. 2 down, 2 to go. Keep that fire off of her, boys, Zan yelled as the remaining troops surrounding him. If they want to get back to Daryam so badly, then we'll send them back there. But our way, keep up the fire. An affirmative crackled back over the comm, and Callista could sense the shift. After a moment, she turned her attention to the next one and repeated the process. She was sweating now beneath her Beskargam, for the task was taking a great deal of concentration. Shortly after, the third turbolaser went up, and she gasped. One left, through teeth gritted in concentration. Zan knew that misdirection was needed. Change your target to the shield tower itself, a younger knight spoke up then. But, sir, the shield is still operational. Zan nearly punched the man before growling, No kidding, genius, but if we change tack, then it keeps them focused on us rather than her. Now do it! A second or two later, the fire began pouring at the tower rather than the last turbolaser emplacement, giving Callista time to focus. She sent him a brief pulse of thanks before turning back to the final turbolaser. Again, she repeated the technique, pulling her focus tighter. She knew that the people manning them were either low-level Sith or slaves, but she could still feel it as their life energy merged with the Force. As the last one imploded, she momentarily sagged against the snowdrift, letting the Force center her. As her breathing slowed from the adrenaline rush, she glanced over at Zane. You ready to tackle that shield tower? We need to get that down so our support ships can get a lock on the compound. Zane nodded. Just keep the rest of Bane's puppets entertained here. I'll have my hands full inside the tower, and I don't need more troops running after me. She smirked humorlessly behind her helmet. You can count on it. We don't need to lay out the welcome mat for them. Get going. We'll cover you. Zane nodded and signaled a small group of Jedi to assist. Right. Cover me. It'll take me a few to cut us a breach entrance. With that, Zan and his squad ran towards the now lightly defended tower. When they arrived, the troopers took aim at the tower's outer defenses, while Zan used his lightsaber to cut into the permacrete wall of the tower itself. The permacrete was so thick that it took close to 10 minutes to cut through the outer layer of the wall, and they still hadn't breached it. And as Zan cut in again, he felt something was out of place. We're gonna skip around a little bit. Sorry. Actually, wait. Okay. Another 15 minutes passed before the inner layer of permacrete fell away to Zan's lightsaber and the breach was made. Right. Split formation. Deved, you and your crew take the west wing. The rest of you come with me to the east. Zan felt Callista's mental push a moment later, and if we don't get this tower down, it won't matter. I'll get this done as quickly as I can. It was as if she'd nodded and then briefly brushed his cheek with her fingers before she withdrew to focus on her own problems. Now that Zan was through, the resistance tightened up a little bit. The Sith she'd squared off against came towards her with a menacing leer. The Jedi in the small squad with her drew close before they moved to engage. The battle was over in short order, but not without injury. One Jedi held his left arm tightly to his side, a saber wound to the shoulder. As he moved towards the tower, she did what she could, hoping that Zan was making his own progress. Meanwhile, moving through the tower, mowing through the Sith apprentices guarding the tower, was more challenging than he first thought. They were coming out from the woodwork, it seemed to him. After decapitating his 13th or 31st apprentice, he knew that they were running out of time. Damn it, looks like we'll need to lace charges here to get through them. We'll have to take the shield offline without the charges. A faint swear could be heard over the comm at that announcement, but they moved to follow his orders. As the squad moved slowly down the corridor, one of the other Jedi held up her hand. Hold a moment, sir, I feel something. Straining over the sounds of discharging blasters and clashing lightsabers, she heard a loud thumping from the room to their left. Sir, I'm sending several people in that room, and it's locked tight. Zan paused and stretched out, and to the young apprentice's credit, she was right. There were people in that room. I need a charge, he bellowed, and quickly an explosive charge was placed into his outstretched hand. Lead the way, apprentice, and he followed her to the locked room. He found a heavy Durasteel door barring the entrance. He knew he couldn't call on the Force to tell if these were people that they could trust or not, so he summoned the apprentice. I'm thinking to Mandawade right now. Tell me if these are allies we're about to bust out or not. She frowned, her face creasing in concentration. They're scared, but there's a lot of discipline under that. I don't sense danger, sir. It's simply a desire to get out in one piece. I'm sorry I can't be more specific than that, but I don't think they mean us any harm. Zan frowned. Right then. He placed the charge and timed it for 5 seconds before pulling himself and the apprentice clear so that they wouldn't get hit with the shrapnel. The door exploded with such force that if he hadn't been wearing a helmet, he likely would have had a case of vertigo thanks to the concussive wave. He looked up at the apprentice and judged that she was okay, rattled, but okay, before returning to the cell. What greeted him was something he hadn't expected to see. A squad of Imperial stormtroopers. Wait, not just stormtroopers. Imperial commandos. What in the name of the Manda? A soft exclamation of surprise fell from the apprentice's lips as she gazed at the black armored figures emerging from the rubble. At least Okay, what? Okay. At least he looked to be an officer from the flash on his shoulder that drew up in front of Zan, taking in the Jedi and the Jedi surrounding the armored Mandalorian. His tone and stance were guarded. Well, this is unexpected. Though I must say you Jedi have impeccable timing. We were beginning to wonder if the Sith had left us to be blown to bits, he chuckled. That is why you're here, isn't it? The Sith? Hello to Sniper. Welcome in. I see you lurking. Something like that, Zan said in a half amazed and half annoyed tone. And that shield is still operational. He looked over at the apprentice. Send the squad ahead a bit. I want to figure out why our friends are here in the first place. With a nod, the young woman turned to the squad of half a dozen Jedi. Sorry. There we go. Scout down the corridor and blockade it. We'll need to hold off the Sith. There were nods, and then the rest of the group departed, their sabers firmly within their grasp. At Zan's tone, her eyebrow quirked slightly at his choice of words before she gazed coolly at the dozen armored figures that stood mere meters from them. The lieutenant grinned, but it seemed a bit forced to her. Well, I know why you're here. Myself and my men, we wanted to ascertain how much of a threat the Sith were to the Remnant, and we got a bit more than we bargained for. He glanced around. I'm surprised it's just you Jedi types. Normally you have New Republic people with you. He frowned. From what we could hear, the fighting's pretty heavy. Zan growled. The geniuses that run the New Republic called this effort a holy war, so we're just here ourselves trying to stop this threat. Zan didn't remove his helmet, but if he had, then his scowling features would have been very clear. But I doubt that is why you lot are here. The Remnant hasn't been all that friendly with us since the rebellion handed you your shebs on a silver platter, so why are you really here? The lieutenant frowned but didn't say anything, and several of his men looked at each other. I'm afraid I can't tell you that, he said. Zan growled. Typical. You save a bunch of rat cans and they clam up when pressed. He sighed. Fine. Then the least you can do is get yourselves geared up and help us take down the shield. Or do Imperial dogs only bite when an old man in a dress says something? The apprentice, Sharon, looked about ready to burst, but her expression calmed after a moment, though the amusement was obvious. The officer bristled. We're squared away. The Emperor's been a long time dead, Jedi. The Empires run differently now. His gaze was stern, but that's a debate for later. Right now, it sounds like we all need to get our butts out of here. We'll worry about the rest later. He glanced pointedly at his men and received curt nods in return. They knew better than to cross him. Sharon, lead these, Dan paused, men to the armory we secured and get them geared up, then lead them back to the east front. Zan looked at the tallish Imperial officer. And keep them in line, Commander. Do I make myself clear? Crystal, sir. Sharon almost thought he braced to attention, but perhaps it had been a trick of the light. Yes, Master, she replied. Ooh, and we're in an ad. Sorry, I'm gonna stop right there. Ad break. Sorry. Ad boss. I apologize. Got a little bit. I'm gonna wait out this ad, so I'm trying not to read during the ads. Alrighty. Got another 40 seconds or so. Sorry. It's been a long day. I apologize for that. I hope everybody is having a good evening and that you had a productive day. Again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you that's here for spending your evening with me. And hopefully you've been able to wander in and just stay and relax. That's why I read. Sorry. It's been a really long day. I do apologize. I will probably be going to bed early tonight. Like, as soon as stream is done, kind of early, probably. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's okay, we're almost done with the chapter. Alright. Crystal, sir. Sharon almost thought that the officer braced to attention, but perhaps it had been a trick of the light. Yes, Master, she replied quietly before gesturing for the troopers to follow her. She still didn't sense ill will from them, but she kept her saber handy anyway. Yeah, it's getting there. But we're almost done with the chapter, so it's early for me to be, heading to bed, but I didn't sleep great last night, so my body's trying to remind me of that fact. And I took my meds early, so that's the other half of it. Nah. We're almost done. Got how far? We're should be able to finish it. Let's see. Nah. I don't want to stop before we get to the end of the chapter. But yeah. No, I took my meds earlier than normal. So that's what's kind of kicking my butt right now. But they're doing what they're supposed to. So that's good, I guess. I wonder how Zan's faring, Callista thought briefly as her small group finally reached the entrance to the Citadel. The only survivors were herself and one other young knight. The fighting had been intense, for the Sith were determined for the Jedi to not reach their leader. Zan moved slowly up the eastern front and finally reached the front of the building. He got a status report over the comm. Second squad has secured the west wing and is doubling back. The east wing is projected to be the entry point to the shield generator. Zan nodded. Get those charges in place. As soon as we blast through, we'll get heavy resistance. He noticed Sharon leading the Imperials to their front, and he grinned again behind his helmet. Thinking like a Mandalorian, he chuckled as he told his group the next part of the plan. Send the rat cans in first until some of the pressure has eased off. The Imperials now had weapons, and their armor was tightened down properly. The young lieutenant looked like he wanted to protest, but he knew some of the Jedi could be difficult. Briefly, he gave instructions over their closed helmet comms, directing them to lay down suppressive fire once the wall came down. Zan growled, "Set the charges for 5 seconds, then prepare to move on my order." And then he addressed the Imperial again. "Captain Ratcan, you will not proceed past laying suppressive fire. You move to the shield and I'll remove that armor and watch you try to swim back to Bastion." He then fell back, waiting until the first wave of Jedi came to their position. Lieutenant bristled and then swallowed audibly, and for a brief moment Sharon empathized. She knew Canadius could be abrasive, but that's how he is. She shrugged and followed Zan as the troopers readied their weapons. 2 seconds later, a bright flash and the detonation shockwave buffeted those in the corridor for a moment before the troopers opened up with their rifles. The settling dust and smoke made it difficult to see, but they seemed to be holding back the Sith well enough. "Jedi, time to rock and roll," he barked. Then a nearby Jedi ran towards the hole in the wall, plunging into the firefight beyond. Ripper fire added to the chaotic sounds of battle. He had to admit the suppressive fire was working well enough for the rest of the Jedi to secure key positions in the generator room. "What have we got left for charges?" "Very little, but it's a shape charge at least. I've got 4 of them, sir. Will that work?" "It may. One way to find out for sure," he said as he grabbed the charges. "I'll place them and then get the rest of us and the rat cans clear before you detonate." "Sir, are you..." The young knight's question died mid-sentence as he caught the set of Zan's shoulders. After a moment he said, "Yes, sir," and turned to attend to his task. The troopers had done an excellent job covering the Jedi advance, and the lieutenant admired the Jedi's determination. Holy war or not, they still fought as if the entire galaxy depended on it. You have to admire that. Zan made his way to the shield controller, but to his horror it looked like the shape charge wouldn't be enough. Zan knew that the only other way to ensure the shield went down was to use one of his back-mounted missiles to destroy the controller. But there would be nowhere to get clear in time. "Is the squad clear?" he asked into the helmet comm. "Yes, sir." Sharon's voice wavered slightly. "The squad and the Imperials are well back from the blast zone." Zan smiled. "Get clear of the tower and meet up with Knight Gesserin. If this goes ill, tell her I love her." And then he cut the comm and began to place the charges. He set the timers in succession so that they didn't detonate all at once. He then got clear from the blast point just as the charges had begun to detonate. Blam! 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 He was nearly knocked cold by the series of concussive waves that the device created, but he wasn't seriously injured, at least not yet. But as he returned to the controller, his fears had proven correct. The controller was damaged, but not destroyed. He knew that the last resort was in play here. He began to power up his launcher. Sharon's stomach nodded as she ducked behind a snowdrift, as Callista had done not long before. Would they get to see each other again? She wondered. His voice had sounded so bleak. Zan braced himself mentally. He knew that even if he was killed here, that he wasn't really dead. Being a Jedi was assured that the belief in the afterlife wasn't just a belief, but actual fact. He sighed. It wasn't death that was scaring him, it was leaving behind Callista. She deserved everything he could possibly give her, and more. She was his heart and soul. Losing her now would hurt. There goes nothing and everything. he said to himself. Calico, you have my heart. And with that, he fired the missile. The explosion caused the ground to heave beneath their feet as Callista's squad slowly progressed towards the citadel. She whirled. She knew that sound, one of Zan's rockets, and it could only be detonated if... She chopped that thought off and swallowed, her shock rippling through the force. The blast overloaded her tired mind, and for a few moments she lost her fix on him. Zan! She ached to go racing towards the inferno, but strong hands held her back, and the knight with the wounded shoulder shook his head. You can't. She went rigid under his touch, barely holding herself back from punching him. He didn't understand. Oh, did somebody get the transponder code of that transport that ran me over? Zan groused, shaking himself clear of rubble that fell over top of him. As he climbed slowly to his feet, he knew he was lucky. He definitely had some broken ribs, perhaps a collapsed lung, but he was still alive. He checked... Oops, wait 1 second. Sorry. He checked to see if the explosion knocked his comm offline and was again surprised to learn that it had not. Strike Team 1, come in. This is Canadius. It took about 30 seconds for anyone to respond. When they finally did, it was Sharon's shocked voice that answered him. We're here, sir, more or less in one piece. She paused. We thought... Zan coughed a bit and chuckled. You thought the big bad Mandalorian Shiboisi had become one with the Force? I know. Lucky for you, I didn't. Progress report? Sharon audibly cleared her throat. 6 are present and accounted for, sir. I also have a fix on Knight Jassarin's team. They're close to the Citadel. Roger that. I'm on my way. He paused. What's the status of the rat cans? Sharon glanced to her right. Still here, sir. Looks like they've thrown in with us for now. They're the reason we got clear in time. Zan chuckled and coughed once more. Make your way to the throne room and await Knight Jassarin's orders. I'll make my way there on my own. Yeah, we're almost done. Understood, sir. Be careful, she added quietly, too softly for the Imperials to hear. But there was relief in her voice. Roger that. Canadius out, Zan said, and then, knowing he had a bit of quiet available to him before throwing himself back into battle, he sent a thought to Callista. I'm fine, love. Her relief flooded him with warmth, but there was an edge to her mental voice. Don't you ever scare me like that again. The sensation of her punching him in the shoulder and then kissing him softly was quite clear. Zan chuckled again and coughed as he felt Callista's response before igniting his jetpack. It would get him to the Citadel quicker, but he needed to make up time. Stefan and Mick definitely needed it. I'll see you inside. Let's end this, Callista thought firmly as she turned her attention to working through the remaining sentries. The corridors within were narrow and dark, but Mick and Stefan's presence blazed like a flame, guiding her slowly towards their location. And yes, sorry, that's a cliffhanger. Nothing I can do about that. We'll have 2 more chapters next time. I normally would be having a workshop stream this coming Sunday, but I unfortunately have a previous commitment, so I will not be able to stream on Sunday. So our next stream where we will see everybody is Wednesday, a week from today. Same time, same place. Thank you, Espresso. I really appreciate that. The grammar sometimes can be a little bit clunky because these are stories that I wrote with friends back in high school, so it's been a long time. And I'm finally getting around to actually reading them. So, but I'm enjoying it, and I hope that you guys, that all of you are as well. I definitely enjoyed writing back then, and I still do. I have some more current stories that are in the works. We'll get there eventually. We'll see. But for now, we're working through the second series. This is the first story in the second series. And we have a few more chapters left on this one before we finish and go on to the next story. Thank you, Espresso. I really appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for being here this evening and joining me as we continue along in our story in Two Whole Things an End. And hopefully that cliffhanger will tide you over until we see each other next week. As always, if you're wanting to catch up on... Thank you. As always, if you're wanting to catch up on anything that you might have missed, you can check out my VODs here on Twitch or over on YouTube. My YouTube is linked at the top of my About page. And you can also check out the stories themselves on Archive of Our Own, which is also linked at the top of my page. Yes. You're very welcome, Harpax. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out with us. And yes, I am really looking forward to having a fun weekend. I'm going camping, so I won't be here on Sunday. So that's why I won't be streaming. So hopefully everybody else has a great rest of your week. I hope that I was able to provide a chill space and some cozy vibes and help you relax in the middle of your week. Let's see. That is not what I want to do. Harpax, do you have a suggestion for who we can raid out to? It's almost 9. I will have to pull up Twitch, actually. Let's see. I'm looking at the other screen. Give me just a second. If anybody has a raid suggestion, that would be appreciated. I am double checking over on actual Twitch. Let's see. Ooh. Yes, I just saw that. Let me go. Here we go. So, Iro Ann is a friend of mine from another streaming community. She's a variety streamer. She plays various games. She reads stories. She does all kinds of stuff on stream. It's really cozy, has a very similar vibe to what I try to promote here. So let's go and say hello to her. And I'm gonna put the raid command in chat for you. Give me just a second here. Let's see. Yep. My stream cat's trying to tell me I just raided my own channel. I still gotta work on that. So yes, let's go raid Anne and say hello. And there's your raid message. Alright, so let's get this raid going. And I'm going to... Okay, and here we go. Okay. Thank you all for the evening, and I will see you next week. Have a good night.